Hello, and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
I'm Andy Rao.
Andy, this week we're going to do something a little bit different. Rather than rolling on any table, you have told me just a few minutes ago that you have a problem that is right in front of you that you wanted to talk about. So we're going to turn this into the GM therapy show, which I am always a fan of, and we're going to get into that.
Yeah.
Before though, we had also talked about just getting back to, it was something we used to do a little bit. We would design D6 tables on air around
Okay.
some sort of like ridiculous prompt. So I think I'm gonna come up with a prompt sort of right here on the spot. Okay, you
All
ready for
right. I
this?
am nervously and excitedly awaiting whatever you're about to say.
Yeah. Okay.
And I should say, I think this podcast might be turning into the support Andy's like current game podcast, which is good because I
Yeah.
need the support.
This is fun for me. I don't know if it's fun for you to keep on having to come hat in hand with please help me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the table that I want to design on air, and we're going to see how this goes, is I want a D6 table of like horrifying things that you can get from livestock. So I'm thinking about
Oh dear.
the egg, the current egg crisis that's going on with chickens and stuff. Like let's think
Okay.
about a little bit more like fantasy like what are some things that you can get from like a farm livestock that would be
Okay.
fun.
I have to ask because I guess I don't follow the right news channels. What's
Yeah.
going on with eggs right now?
Oh, the avian flu is going around.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you don't buy eggs regularly, for whatever reason, egg prices have gone up like 3 times, 3x what they used to be
Okay.
beforehand, just because the avian flu comes right, and they have to sort of like take out all the chickens and stuff. So it's like it's sort of on my mind because we eat a lot of eggs in this household.
Okay.
Yeah,
We eat relatively few eggs, so basically anytime we're pulling the eggs out of the kitchen, we're out of the fridge, we're checking like when the expiration date was
yes, yeah,
and does anyone in the house know if eggs expire and how long it takes them to expire?
yeah. You're
Yeah.
frantically googling.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um, okay,
Well,
so
that's interesting. So you were specifically thinking of a sort of fantasy context.
yeah, think of fantasy context because like otherwise we'd be like, I don't know, like milk from a cow, right? So like let's maybe think about like fantasy monsters. Stuff that you can kind of get from them or collect that's maybe useful.
So why
Um
don't you, if you have anything in mind, why don't you throw an
mm,
example to help me get a good sense of where you're angling for here?
yeah. Okay, so this one might not make the table. But like I'm thinking about like owl bears, for example. Like maybe you
Okay.
could get like owl bear feathers, something like that.
Got it. Okay, so
Yeah.
you're looking for interesting or weird stuff you can get from basically monsters that you kill. Is
Yeah.
that the idea? Okay.
Yeah. Kill or steal or raise as livestock.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting. I mean, when you first mentioned this, livestock seem to play kind of a weirdly central role in, like, I guess the kind of the genre of creepy stuff that can happen. We
Mhm.
are well past the point where most of us are living farming lives or whatever, but I would say it's still a moderate staple in horror literature that something going wrong with with livestock or with animals points to something truly bad that is happening, which is
Yeah.
interesting to me. It's like a weird cultural memory of the days when we all were growing up in a more agricultural environment.
Yes. Yeah, I'm thinking about the Stranger Things. I think it was like season 2. Like all the pumpkins are rotting or something like that. And it's like,
Yeah.
yes, of course I would know what that looks like. Right? Like, yeah. Yeah, it's like I have no context for like, yeah, what it would look like if it was going bad. But yeah.
Okay, so this is a table of d6 things that you find in the, I guess, help me understand what this d6 table is.
Yeah, let's give it a better title than what I've been saying. Maybe it's like D6 resources from monsters.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's good.
Okay.
So I'm always a fan of the idea that like the bones or some sort of remain from a creature gives you like a lesser version of whatever their defining power is.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So, what are some monsters with really unique defining powers? So like Medusa sprang to mind.
Mm-hmm.
What would be like, so whatever. So you get the bone of a Medusa from a Medusa or something. What
Yeah.
would like a lesser version of its petrifying power be?
Oh, that's really
Like if
interesting.
you
Yeah.
ground the bone up and mix it into a potion or something like that, what would it let you do a couple times?
What if it gave you like a almost like a defensive thing, like a stone skin,
Hmm,
right?
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, like like you can still move and everything, but like all of a sudden, yeah, you can resist being stabbed
Yep.
for a
Okay.
bit. Yeah. All right. I like that.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say just like Medusa bone.
Yep.
Um, we'll leave it there. Along those lines, I started thinking about like dragons, right? Have all sorts of breath weapons. Like, what if you
Sure.
had the dragon scale? Like, comes up a lot. Like maybe like the blood. Like, what if you had like the tongue of a dragon?
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and like that that itself could, I don't know, emanate some like the poison that they breathe out or the fire.
When dragons are using their tongues
Hmm.
in most fairy stories and a lot of fantasy tales, they're being eloquent deceiver types,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So what if a dragon's tongue doesn't give you whatever fire breath or something, but
Hmm.
it I don't know, it lets you lie or twist, not lie maybe, but like twist the truth, or
Hmm.
basically gives you a plus 20 to your
Yeah.
deception or persuasion skills or something like
Oh, I
that.
like that too. Okay, maybe there's like a sub table. It's like the dragon tongue either allows you to breathe fire or or
Right, right.
you can lie real good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm trying to also imagine when someone is rolling on this table, if you're rolling on this table when the party is digging through like a evil
Mm.
wizard's like
Yes.
treasure vault or something like that.
Yeah, the wizard supply room.
Yeah. What are some of the weirdest monsters you've seen in D&D?
I mean, they're all sort of weird. Like I keep thinking about beholders, which are just like such an iconic part of sort of like the D&D style fantasy, but like those are weird, right? Like
Yeah.
there's like nothing about that makes sense, right? They float, they have a bunch of eyes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean like I think like the eye stock of a beholder would be a pretty good thing to be able to find.
Would that give you extra eyes or something if consumed or something?
Yeah, I bet like if you had that, if you affix it to yourself, it adds like an extra eye, right? So
Okay.
like if you have this eye stalk, it's like maybe 4 feet long with the eyeball still on it. You can kind of like stick it on your shoulder, and
Yeah.
it'll like grab on and hook into your nervous system.
Okay, that works. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. What are some other iconic D&D creatures? So my mind is drawn to kind of the goofy ones.
Hmm.
So there's like the cloaker, which
Oh,
is it's like a blanket that affixes itself to a cave ceiling and then like falls on you and wraps you up in it. Basically, what would the remains of that thing give you if you ground it up and put it in a potion?
can you see this thing like the cloaker? Can
It
you see
is. It's like a physical thing. It's like a blanket that just drops on you and grabs you, I think.
it? That's
So I
great.
don't know, does it let you stretch or something?
Oh yeah, I like that. Yeah, stretch or maybe slows your descent in some fashion.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, that's like probably the more practical thing. It basically gives you, the equivalent of like a feather fall
Yeah. Okay.
spell or something like that. Okay.
I'm gonna say I don't even know what part of the cloaker would this be. The cloaker skin.
They don't look like they have a great amount of kind of internal structure to them, so I guess just a strip of its skin or something.
Yeah. Okay. Cloaker skin gives you like feather fall. That's good. I'm going to let's skip anything that's like obviously sentient and nice, right? So no kobolds, no goblins, anything like
For
that.
sure, yeah.
Yeah. What are some other good ones? There's like the is it the Shambling Mound?
And that's a classic for sure.
Yeah. The Shambling Mound's fun. I used one of those in a campaign that I ran a while ago, and I really liked running that as a monster. Like, yeah, it's just sort of a creepy thing to encounter inside of a swamp. But like Shambling Mound, you can engulf a medium creature. Like, I wonder if that's just like a it adds a nice flavor to a salad or something like that. Like, it doesn't have to be.
that's that's kind of wonderfully nasty, but
Yes.
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that works.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different creatures like the phase spider and the displacer beast that
Hmm.
sort of the creatures that exist in or can flit between different kind of states of different dimensions or sort of states of being.
Hmm.
What's sort of like
Oh,
minor effect that you might gain related to that?
that's cool. Like a displacer beast, like a whisker from a displacer beast.
Right, right.
Yeah. I like the idea of maybe only part of you being able to blink or otherwise
Ha.
go. Yeah, so like if you have the whisker, like whatever that whisker is touching, like you have, I don't know, it's like a 1 foot, cube that can blink in some fashion.
So like if you're holding it in your hand, your like arm and hand appear like 5 feet off from to the
Yes.
side from where you are. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so sort of like a mage hand style thing, but it's like actually your arm.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yes.
Okay, we got to have that.
Okay.
All right,
All right.
how
Well,
many items on our list do we have so
that is
far?
our six. I like that.
Oh, there's a six. Okay, can you read them off for us then?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So the D6 table for let's yeah. I like the wizard supply room idea. So the D6 table of things you could find in a wizard supply room. So there's a Medusa bone, a dragon tongue, the eye stalk of a beholder, a piece of cloaker skin, which that's just gross.
It really is gross. I'm deeply regretting bringing
Yes.
that up,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
press on.
Yeah. A piece of a shambling mound or a displacer beast whisker. I think those are all pretty good. Like, yeah. So we had a couple things that those could do as well, but I think we could leave that up to the GM for like, what are you gonna do with this part of the displacer beast whisker?
I
Yeah.
like that, and that could work as like a what weird magic item does your character start with in a one shot or something like
Yes.
that.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Yep,
All really good stuff. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for making that table with me. Those are always fun to do.
you
All right.
bet.
So Andy, you said that you had a problem. Let's try to discuss it.
Yeah, so normally we'd roll on our table of topics here to talk about what we're going to talk about, and I guess here's the problem I've got, and I'm going to use a term and then quickly qualify it in
Okay.
case it alarms you. But how do you deal with the game with GM or gamer like ADHD?
Okay.
And I say ADHD deliberately. So just full disclosure, I said that's a diagnosis I have. It's something I
Hmm.
experience. So I say it with intentionality, but by it I mean I'm describing something that I think that I'm hoping affects most GMs, which is that you can be in the middle of a great rewarding campaign and your eye starts to drift to the next shiny object on your gaming shelf. So you
Yeah.
might also think of it as sort of shiny object syndrome or something.
Yeah.
So I mean, here's the real situation I'm in right now. I'm like 5 sessions into a really rewarding Call of Cthulhu game,
Hmm.
and my I'm starting to eye the other games on my shelf and thinking, wouldn't it be fun to run that
Mm.
instead? And the more I indulge that thinking, the less enthused I feel about running the really rewarding, perfectly good, enjoyable Call of Cthulhu game I have going right now.
Hmm.
So I guess let me start by saying, is this something you can relate to at all, Chris, or this is not, or this is an alien concept to you?
No, I can relate a little bit. I am wondering, right? So this is, if I'm remembering correctly, this is the first like longer campaign you've taken on in a while. Is that
Yeah.
true?
Yep.
Yeah. This is the first like like you don't have sort of like a beginning, middle, and end already planned out necessarily for it. Yeah,
Right.
campaign. Yeah, I kind of wonder if some of it is. I'm gonna excuse your behavior for yourself, but
Yeah.
like I'm wondering if some of it is just like oh, this is going great, and now your mind's sort of thinking about like, oh, here's all the other stuff that I can now run, like now that I'm proving to myself that I can do this longer campaign again.
I think you're totally right here because that is where my mind is going. It's going to some of those sort of like quote white whale type
Hmm.
ideas like,
Yeah.
well, if I'm running this Cthulhu game okay, like instead of this Cthulhu, maybe I should have started us on this other like white whale project I have.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Okay. Yeah.
so
I think like so I can identify with this, and I think that's part of the reason why I'm drawn so much more to like one shots and stuff right
mhm.
now. Just whenever I get a chance to actually run games, it's just because it's like the thought of getting tied into a multi-year campaign when there's like so many other games to try, right, is a little scary. Even though I know that's a rewarding experience to run something and to play in something, for that like over the course of a couple years or whatever it is, mini sessions to play play one game like that, really get to kind of know it and all that sort of stuff. Like knowing that intellectually is very different from the emotional feel of like, okay, like, but I mean, there's this, it's fun to learn a new game. It's fun to think through how you might tell a new story at the table, and all that, right? So I do identify it on that level, although I do not have ADHD
Yeah.
myself.
I mean, GMs invest on average, I would say, just more time, more mental time
Hmm.
into the campaigns we're running, if my players devote 3 hours once a week to this campaign,
Hmm.
it's going to be a while before they feel like they've been simmering in this campaign for maybe too long and they're ready for something
Yeah.
else. But like in between those 3 hour weekly sessions, I, the GM, have probably spent, I don't know, 15 hours thinking about it or planning about it or just
Hmm.
having it simmer in the back of my mind. And so part of me feels like I've been in this setting forever.
Yeah.
I mean, in real time, it's been like 6 weeks,
Yeah.
but I feel like I've been thinking about and exploring all of the corners of this campaign in this setting for a very long time already, and I'm almost ready to move on. But my players are absolutely not, because they're having a blast right where they are.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever experienced that discrepancy?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I haven't thought about it in that way. Yeah, that just the pure amount of time that you've spent thinking about it, like that asymmetry is going to come out of the table. Like, so part of that is like you need to do that in order to help guide the story a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Whatever that means for you at the table, and to be prepared for what they might do, right? And I think there's even if you are a improv GM, right? Like all you do is improv. My guess is you're still spending a ton of your time, and we've talked about this concept of GM brain quite a bit,
Yeah.
and it's just like you just spend a lot of time thinking about like how to make things gameable, right? And like how
Yep.
you present it at the table. And I think because of that, like you might jump to the conclusion of like, oh, this is like, not jump to the conclusion, but to sort of figure it out before someone who's not thinking about it all the time might
Yeah.
figure it out. Right. So like for you, the experience of thinking through maybe like a scenario, it's like you can come up with 100 different ways to go through it, much faster just because you have those muscles sort of built up, built up
Sure.
versus what your players are having. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely experienced that too, where like you sometimes you're running a session and it's just like it feels like it's going really slowly because you have thought through it. But for the
Yeah.
people experiencing at the table, it's like this is it might be fast paced for them, right?
Right.
Like
And
they
it's the
might, yeah.
first time they're like confronting these ideas, whereas
Mhm.
you've thought about them from many different angles already.
Yes, yeah, because you want to be you want to be ready for it. Yeah, so I mean, I think there's definitely like that, and we've talked about pacing quite a bit on this podcast in the past. It's interesting to think about that just from like a pacing of your enjoyment of the material, right? Because you're like it'd be different if you were getting paid for this or something like that, right? Like,
Sure.
yeah, then it's like, well, I mean, I got to put in the hours because it's part of the job, right? Clock in and clock out. Yeah, if you're just playing something for fun, I mean, absolutely, I think it's a totally normal thing to be like, I'm getting a little bored of this. Maybe there's something else we can do.
Yeah.
Right. Unless you're committed to the game that you're playing and the way in which you're playing it. So I guess
Yeah.
maybe that's the question I have for you. It's like, what have you committed to in telling this story in the game that you're playing?
Can you clarify your question a little bit
Yeah.
more?
Yeah. Like, so when I'm saying committed, what I'm trying to get at is like, so you as the GM, like, what have you presented or agreed to actually run this game? Did you say like, I'm going to run this just until it's done? Or did you say like, we're going to tell this story to this kind of completion?
That's an interesting question, and my answer might not be applicable to a lot of GMs. But my
Mm,
motivation here was basically I enjoy role playing with my family.
okay.
So we are going to devote a certain amount of time each week to just meeting together and role playing.
Hmm.
The particular incarnation of role playing that like hits where the Venn diagram is the greatest, whatever the match is the greatest between all the different people involved, is Call of Cthulhu.
Hmm.
So the goal is basically we all kind of enjoy this stuff, but the more than the genre or the topic we're exploring, we enjoy spending this time together in sort of a semi-structured game environment.
Mm-hmm.
I do have a potentially very long campaign that lies in front of us. I've been working really hard because I know I'm so familiar with that GM trap of like getting really absorbed with the idea of like a grand epic campaign.
Yeah.
And then the pursuit of that, you somehow manage to not stick the landing on just the week to week
Yes.
fundamentals of making each game feel fun and rewarding. So
Hmm.
I've been working overtime. I've been working my brain overtime to try to like it's okay if I'm laying the groundwork for a longer campaign, but don't don't commit yourself to that longer campaign. Let it build out of these week to week sessions in like an organic way
Yeah.
instead of attempting setting myself up for like a GMing goal that I'll fall short of.
I think you're super wise to do that. Like, yeah, because it is rare in my experience for the last session to sort of be the thing that you remember for the rest of ever, right? Like you
Mm,
really remember the little moments, or it'll be those small character moments where you sort of unlock, like, oh, like now I get the person that I was playing. Those sorts of things, like that's what sticks with people more than anything, and those only happen in the week to week.
yeah.
Like nailing those. I'm just gonna take a small digression. Like this really reminds me of, and this is almost purely for John Corey. So John, if you're listening, John and I both play Slay the Spire. This is a video game
Yeah.
quite a bit. And there, once you get into that game more and more, you start to realize like what you're actually trying to do in that game, and like there is a tendency when you first pick up this game. It's a roguelike where you're building. It's like a deck based roguelike that you can forget that if that doesn't mean anything to you, but
Right.
there's a tendency in that game to be planning for like the final battle. I think when you first pick up the game, you're like, oh, like I need to be ready for this last thing that's going to happen in the game. If everything goes perfectly, I'll get to that like end boss and I'll be able to beat it because I have this perfect deck that I've constructed from the first thing. But as I'm getting into it more and more and watching and kind of like reading various like YouTubers explanations about how to get good get good at the
Uh-huh.
game, they really hammer home like you need to plan for that, but you also need to just sort of like plan for sort of the next fight that you're in. Right.
Hmm.
And like don't be afraid to use your resources. Don't be afraid to sort of tune your deck towards the next thing that's coming. Right. And like I think about that a lot in terms of GMing as well. It's like, yeah, there is that like, yes, of course you want to stick this grand finale, this like amazing epic story moment where you bring in all these different pieces and stuff that you've been setting up in the whole game. But like they're gonna remember the weird NPC they met in session 3. Like, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, yeah, and that's the sort of stuff. Like, yeah, you gotta hit those little moments as you're going through the campaign. You gotta give them chances to show off, like who their character is and really like yeah grapple with those sorts of things as well.
Interesting and relevant. I've also played Slay the Spire, and
Mhm.
that's a lesson I struggled to learn. So here's a different way of spinning this question. I envy the look in players' eyes when they are introduced to, when they're exploring the adventure in the game and they're bumping into these encounters and challenges and stuff for the first time. And you can see their brains spinning as they try to figure the way around your obstacles that you've put in their path. I envy that experience of, I guess, newness and adventure and wow, here's this brand new challenge for us to get around. Do you, and how do you capture that feeling as the GM, that feeling of like being delighted and surprised by what happens at a game session that you've maybe spent hours laboriously planning for?
That's tricky because I think the way that I tend to run games, I feel like when I walk into a game session, it is nice for me to feel like I'm in control of what's going to happen because
Yeah.
I like that personally. But every time that those expectations are subverted, I'm usually delighted because it's like I wouldn't have thought about that, right? Like that's phenomenal. Like I love that. Like let's go with that. And I think I mean, it goes back to that concept of being a fan of the characters or a fan of the players. I'm not
Hmm.
sure which. You should probably be a fan of the players and the characters, but like yeah, being sort of like their cheerleader too, and like being okay with the solution that they come up with, even if it's not optimal as far as your story is concerned necessarily. Like to me, I find great delight in that, and so part of that means like maybe not planning out the solution as well.
Hmm.
And again,
Yep.
we've talked about this quite a bit on the podcast, over different episodes and stuff of like yeah you can present the problem and sort of trust player cleverness to find the solution. You don't have to come in with like okay well here's the three possible solutions, they have to pick one of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, so like the one shot I ran on the podcast back in December, a month or so ago, there is one part of that session where the notes really did just say like whatever they decide to do, like reward it as long as it's not like them just sort of giving up, right? Like
Right. Yep.
reward their cleverness in some way. And what came out of that was like me presenting the situation and then just sort of waiting to see what happened. And what happened was my favorite part of the session, right? Like
Hmm. Yep.
yeah. So like I mean, you can probably engineer that. I'm sure there's a limit at which you can't. like a limit at which the players sort of want you to present them with a few potential solutions. But I
Yeah.
think leaving it open a little bit more than what we as GMs might naturally sort of lean towards is probably going to be where you're going to find your most joy out of the session.
The thing that springs to mind as you were describing that experience, Chris, is like the difference between making a great presentation about like a book to your book group
Hmm.
or having a great list of discussion questions for your book group, you
Yeah.
know? Like
Yeah.
in the one model you spend a lot of time, and I guess you get some satisfaction from delivering your presentation well and seeing that your audience was interested and inspired by it. But how much more fun for you when rather than doing all that preparation, you just showed up with a list of questions that prompted a great discussion that
Mm.
you yourself benefited from as much as the other participants, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, like in some ways, that's sort of the thesis of our podcast here too, right? Of like having these tables where we're not quite sure what we're gonna say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and deliberately putting ourselves in the situation where we can't prepare, right? To sort of see what comes out. Like, and sometimes I mean, like, we'll be honest, like we've thrown away podcast episodes because it was like clearly this was not working,
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
we're talking about it. But for the most part, it's always surprising to me. Yeah, and I mean, I think like a well researched version of this podcast, just like a well researched version of your book club sort of discussion topics. It's like it is what it is. I think it's not what we're interested in
Yeah.
as GMs, right? Like I'm sure there are some GMs who that is what they love, but that's not necessarily where I find the most joy.
So I'm going to try to do my prep in a way that is most likely to evoke that kind of thing, which is to say, I'll be more delighted by a player response if I haven't spent too much time imagining what the player response is going to
Yeah,
be, you know?
yeah. Can I go? I want to go back to sort of your original question about like looking at your gaming shelf and being like, oh, that would be an interesting interesting game to run. I think the fear that maybe I'm reading into this is that if you switch to a different game, maybe the reason why you're playing this particular like gaming group might fall apart,
Yeah,
right? Like
totally.
so,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. Like so, you have Call of Cthulhu. It's like this is going well, and there's that fear of like if I tinker with this too much, they're not going to want to deal with the mechanical rules of combat and Twilight Twilight 2000.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, I guess like what have you sensed? Is there you're 5 sessions in? Have you sensed that like the group is ready to move on?
I have not. I mean,
Okay.
they're just throughout the week I get looking forward to Cthulhu. So this is entirely a problem that's coming from my brain.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
that's part of the reason I bring it up here. It's like in some way, I am sabotaging myself,
yeah,
and I am aware of this, and I want to stop it, but it's hard, right?
yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I mean, I get it. It's like, I mean, this is the same reason I have 4 or 5 books currently being read at the same time, right? It's the same thing.
yeah,
You're like, well, I might as well just add another one there, right?
right, right.
Yeah.
So when you do have a couple of books together, I mean, is there anything you can do to stop that and to get back the focus that brought you joy in the first place?
No. Usually, usually, yeah. Usually what happens is like, I'll finally hit a point, and reading's been tough for me for the past few years for a couple of reasons, but like
Yeah,
I'll usually if when that scenario is happening, I'll usually hit a point where like one of the books I hit a point where I'm like, I have to finish this, right? Either because it's a really good book or I just need to move it out of the queue because it's keeping me from enjoying reading
yes,
in other ways. And I think maybe that's the takeaway is like you might hit a point in this Cthulhu game, like you might prep some of the other stuff, but you might hit a point in this Cthulhu game where you're like, no, this is the one we got to take it to this
yeah.
point, right? And I think that's what you should be looking for before you switch. By all means, prep stuff, read stuff. Like I think that's totally fine. You might end up being like, actually, I didn't really want to run this. What I wanted is just this element, and I can bring it to the game. But like, you might hit that point in your Cthulhu game where you're just like, okay, like now we see where this is heading. Like, let's take
Hmm.
it to completion, and then hopefully we can pick up the next thing after.
So the thing I've been trying to avoid is setting as my goal this unrealistic, like, 2-year epic
Mhm.
campaign, legendary RPG campaign that will never
Yeah,
happen, right?
yeah,
But maybe some smaller like milestones would be good
hmm,
to set. Like,
yeah,
maybe my goal is not to run weekly Call of Cthulhu for 2 years, but maybe it is to, in 4 months, get to this certain milestone in the story, and then
hmm,
that could be a jumping off point, but it might, but maybe the energy of getting to that milestone might build up enthusiasm for reaching the next milestone after that, right?
Hmm. Yeah, think so. Like, I mean, you're gonna know your brain chemistry better than better than I will.
Yeah.
I'm sure some of our listeners who like might have an ADHD diagnosis as well might have some more concrete concrete things to tell you. But like, yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely something to that. Like, find the way to reward yourself and whatever that is, and
Hmm.
we're making the games up anyway, right? So like go ahead and give
Yeah.
yourself milestones. If you need to like, like the Castlevania setup for this is, collecting all the various parts of Dracula. It's like those are some really good milestones to have in
Hmm.
front of you. It's like, oh, I gotta get the heart and I gotta get the fang. I gotta get like, all these things collected and then I can go beat Dracula. You could have those milestones built into your Call of Cthulhu game. I don't know exactly what the story is, right? But you could have some of
Totally.
those
Yep.
like we need to get X, Y, and Z to go do whatever, right? Like to
Yep.
go complete our goal. Yeah, and like if you hit those milestones and it's like we're not interested in getting Y, like or like we're not interested in doing that last one, fast forward to the end or come up with something else, right? Like there's yeah, I think it's okay. Yeah, okay to end campaigns without the big epic thing
Yeah.
as well. And I'm not telling you to end your campaign because I think it's delightful
Yeah.
and you should go. You should ride that as long as it'll go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't plan to end it,
Yeah.
and if, I don't mean to overstate it either, but
Hmm.
this is a time when I'm feeling my eyes start to stray, and it's
Hmm.
like I need a little help, like stay focused on the goal, which in this case is probably just hit a milestone of,
Hmm.
for me, the milestone is going to be wrap up all of the stuff they're doing in the city of New York,
Mm.
which is a couple of months worth of play, I think.
Yeah.
And then if like we're all gung ho, then great, we're moving on to the next stage, England.
Yeah, I will say that I know for a fact that a lot of the listeners are very jealous of what you have right now too.
Ha.
That's a terrible reason to do something, right? Is like someone else's jealousy. But like I mean you're getting to like do this very cool thing of running a game for your family and they're enthused about it. Like that's awesome. Even if it ended, like right now, it's like that is a
Yeah.
huge success. Like
Yeah.
carry that for the rest of your life. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I need to respect that. Do you, Chris, do you have this experience with video games at all? Like I do this with video games as well, by the way. I get
Mhm.
like, 60 hours into Elden Ring.
Yeah.
And then with completion of the game on the horizon, I'm like, yeah, look at this
Yes.
other game I've got here. Like I could just
Yep.
reinstall this other game I guess I haven't been interested enough in to play until now, but suddenly it looks
Now,
appealing.
yes, yeah. Now that I'm into it, oh yes, yeah. I think actually you and I stopped almost at the exact boss in Elden
Yes,
Ring.
we
So.
did. I know. Elden Ring hangs like a whatever, a sort of, I don't know what the metaphor is here, but
Yeah,
a
sort of Damocles.
big
It's like
unfinished, like sort of, you almost made it sort of Damocles
yeah,
over my,
yes, yeah.
okay.
Okay, all right. Well, let's wrap it up. I mean, I guess do you have
Yep.
any other kind of like last parting thoughts or last questions?
No, this is really helpful. I think what I'm pulling out of this conversation is going to be just trying to interrogate what I enjoy out of these sessions
Hmm.
and planning in a way that I'm likely to enjoy it as much as the players do.
Hmm.
That feels big to me.
Yeah.
And then I also like the idea of, letting go of super long-term stuff and like aiming at a milestone. All that to say, I mean, I'm having a great time. Campaign is going well. I'm excited about it, running it again tonight. It's
Yeah.
going to be fun. I hope this conversation hasn't come across as me harumphing about something that is really fun for me to do,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I did want to check in I think it was the last episode we chatted a little bit about like you were a little fearful that they were going to get stuck. Do you feel like you've gotten past that?
So we did get past that, and they didn't really get stuck. And
Ooh.
uh, here's the thing: I don't really know why it worked. Like,
Okay.
maybe
Well, this is good.
this is
Yeah.
not good jamming advice, but it kind of worked out okay. So I was worried they would get stuck with a particular scene, and I was glad that I had a backup plan for if they got stuck. But they didn't really get stuck, and so I had just incorrectly guessed that it would stump them.
Hmm.
It's a classic GM thing, right? The stuff that like seems really easy to you, it completely trips up players and blows up the session,
Hmm.
and then the stuff you thought was going to be hard, they blow through instantly. So I
Yes.
mean, ultimately in that session, so I did find our conversation about it really useful. And I did have an NPC that was kind of waiting in the wings
Hmm.
to offer a few, maybe not very subtle, but whatever,
Hmm.
clues to get things going. But as it turned out, the players they had been paying attention more than I thought they had been paying attention. And
Nice.
I guess so it all worked out.
Either paying attention or they secretly listened to the podcast and didn't tell
Well,
you.
that could also be the case, yes.
Yes.
Although
Yeah.
I really don't think my teenager is making it through these podcast episodes, but
No,
I
probably
could
not.
be wrong. I'd be
Yeah.
delighted to be wrong about that. But
Yeah, that'd be great. That's something they will not tell you until they're much older.
right, right, for
So,
sure. Yeah, you guys listen to each episode, right? What did you guys think of that last episode? That
yeah,
was great.
yeah. All right, cool. All right, well, let's wrap it up. So, Roll for Topic is part of the Roll for It Media podcasting network. Our sister show, The Splat Book, with John Corey and Kyle Latino, is continuing their Appendix N series of episodes. And Andy, you were on the most recent episode.
I was, yes.
Yeah, what were you talking about?
We discussed Stephen King's The Gunslinger. And
Yeah,
so we walked through that story and we made periodic shout outs to kind of game and RPG related concerns and questions that it prompts.
yeah,
It's
that's
super
great.
fun.
It is, yeah. It's a delightful show, and I know you probably enjoyed just being a guest, just kind of sit back and and just respond rather than having to
Those
run
two,
it.
man, being in a conversation with those two is a truly exhilarating experience because they're
Yes,
so smart and so sharp. So, yeah,
yes,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, I've listened to a chunk of that episode. I got really like I've not read The Gunslinger. Kyle says something in that podcast episode. He directs it at me and he knows exactly what he was doing, but he says something in that episode that made me want to hit pause and go read The Gunslinger immediately. So
Yes.
there you go. Yeah, so yeah, go check them out at thesplatbook.com. Yeah, any other last thoughts before we say goodbye?
Just a advance warning for you, Chris. Next episode, I'm going to start poking you about your 2023 GMing plans.
Oh
So,
yeah, and
yeah,
I will have something to say about that then, hopefully.
good.
So,
That's awesome. I look forward to it. So,
cool. All right, yeah. Well, I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
Remember, if your players are having fun, you're a great GM.